All right, folks, is this on? Okay. I think the time has come. Welcome to the K-12 education discussion. Thank you all for being here. I am Meg Bohmke. I am on the Stafford County Board of Supervisors, and I am president-elect of VACO. So, anyway, I would like to introduce our speaker today, and I'm honored to be in her presence. We have Senator Barbara Favola, who represents the 31st District, which includes parts of Arlington and Fairfax County and a portion of Loudoun County as well. Prior to her election as state senator, Barbara Favola served on the Arlington County Board for 14 years and chaired the body 3 times. That was from 1997 to 2011. During her service with the county, Senator Favola was the board's leading advocate for children, youth, and families, and her contributions to the community include establishing mental health services in the public schools. Throughout her public life, she has been a vigorous supporter of universal human rights. In the Virginia Senate, Barbara is focusing her legislative efforts on women's reproductive rights, healthcare access, K-12 education funding, workforce training, safety net programs, helping foster children, preventing domestic violence, and sensible environmental policies. Sensible, I love that word. Senator Favola is a whip in the Virginia Senate Democratic Caucus. She chairs the Virginia Senate's Rehabilitation and Social Services Committee, as well as serving on the Local Government Committee, Transportation Committee, Rules Committee, Agriculture, Conservation and Natural Resources Committee, and she is a member and former chair of the Virginia Advisory Committee for Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence. She chairs the Senate Women's Healthcare Caucus, and she is a member of and former chair of Virginia's Commission on Youth. She served on Governor McAuliffe's Climate Change and Resiliency Update Commission and served on the Disability Commission and the Joint Committee to study the future of public education. Senator Favola serves on the advisory board of Virginia Tech School of Public and International Affairs and on the board of the Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind. And with that, if we could give a warm welcome to Senator Favola. Thank you. Thank you all. I feel right at home here. I was a member of the VACO board for 12 years, almost the entire time I was on the Arlington County board, and I was your president-elect as well, but then I won a term in the Senate. So at that time, you said I couldn't serve on the VACO board and serve in the state Senate at the same time. So I'm sorry. I hope you don't feel abandoned, but I remember all the good lessons you taught me when I served on your VACO board. I'm here today to speak a little bit about education. And I first want to say kudos to all of you who might have second jobs in the educational system, either as teachers or administrators or counselors. So those of you who have direct responsibility for the education system, thank you. And we give you a round of applause. You've had a hell of a year. So I'll start with one topic under the education rubric that I know is important. I did serve on the School Modernization Committee, and we traveled across the Commonwealth. And I know many facilities are not up to standard, any modern standard. In fact, more than 1,000 schools in the Commonwealth are 50 years of age or older. And if we were to replace those schools, it would be a $25 billion tax bill. But it doesn't mean we can't make progress. So these past few, 12, 14 months, the General Assembly was busy allocating money that we received from the federal government. And it was one-time money. Some of it came from the CARES Act, and some money came from the Rescue Act, the American Rescue Act money. And we put over $1 billion into our schools. We passed it out to our different school systems and gave you as much flexibility as the federal frameworks would allow.
fortunately, they did allow a lot of flexibility. So you could use that money. You could use the money to give teachers bonus pay. You could use the money to upgrade facilities if health or safety code needed to be met. You could use it to sanitize schools. You could use it to purchase equipment to keep COVID vaccination, to keep COVID spread down. You could do virtual learning. You could actually do teacher training with it. And I understand that the schools really have been creative, and you have realized that although, COVID was a very, very unfortunate and very, painful in many ways episode for us to go through, and we're still going through it. We are taking steps to try to correct some really serious infrastructure and equality measures that have to be corrected. Recently, so this should be right on your top of mind, $250 million was allocated and is probably in the process of going out the door to help schools. Every school in the Commonwealth would be eligible if they can demonstrate they need to upgrade their HVAC system, and if a roof needs to be replaced to support that HVAC system, you would be eligible for this grant money. Now, there is a dollar for dollar requirement. So for every state dollar you're getting, local money would have to be put on the table. But the dollars are there, and every school, as long as the school would have a life cycle long enough, like another 25 years, you're not going to be replacing the entire school. As long as it has a long enough life cycle to support an upgraded HVAC system, you can demonstrate you need it. And if you need a roof to support that system, you are eligible for this grant program. And I understand that our Virginia Department of Education actually did send out information to every school system. So ask your superintendent if he or she has received that information. Okay, so let's go on now to the teachers and the environment that our schools have to work in and how we can improve that environment. So as we continued to look at our education dollars, it became very obvious that more ongoing money is needed. And this is where you have to really watch your state allocations, and my colleagues, myself, and others have to be very careful and judicious, because there's one-time money, which is what we have received from the federal government, and there's ongoing money. And what you folks really need is what I've heard in your sessions earlier today, is you need ongoing money so you can get your standards of quality fully funded. And standards of quality are really important. Obviously, the General Assembly passed them and made them law because we were making a statement about the quality of education we expected in the Commonwealth. Unfortunately, we left our localities with a large portion of the bill. Virginia does a very good job in many ways, but we are 41st in the nation in terms of state spending per pupil. So the local governments are spending much more per pupil on average across the Commonwealth than the state is putting on the table. And we need to change that, I think. We need to change that ratio. So my advice to you, first off, is, and I think we heard this from Jim Regenball today, and Jim, you did a great job in your presentation. There is a cap on your support services that the state applied. So, support services for support personnel will not go up. So look at that list of who qualifies as support personnel. Maybe you want to change people who are currently on that support list, get them off of that support personnel list and move them over to a standards of quality list. Because once a personnel slot is listed in the standards of quality, then there is going to be some state money available, even if it's not fully funded. So I think that's one thing, one homework lesson you should take back with you. You look very carefully at what that list is that suffers from the cap. For example, I think technology personnel happen to be under that support personnel cap. I don't think technology personnel would belong under a support personnel cap particularly. Would you agree, Jim? No, you have to get a state standard. So that's where your lawmakers would, after talking to you, would hopefully put in legislation to get a state standard on the books. So let me go on and say the other big piece of your funding for schools, of course, is teacher funding. And depending on all the different studies that are out there, Virginia, if you look at occupations in Virginia, occupations that require the same education level as a teacher would require, if you look at that list, the teachers are the lowest paid. But if you look across the spectrum, like I think it's the National Education Association, has a list that ranks Virginia either 35th or 36th, depending on what criteria you're looking at. If you're looking at the average pay of teachers compared to the average pay of teachers across the country. So we're not great by any shot. And teaching, as we've all learned through this pandemic, is a challenging profession. There isn't a profession that requires more patience, diligence, creativity, and I think just downright dedication. Our students, we love them, but they're challenging. They learn at different rates. They learn at different speeds. They learn different ways. So we have to come up with lessons that are delivered in a different framework, that emphasize different strengths. Some of our students are good auditory learners. Some of them really have to read everything. So the point I'm making is teaching is very complex, and we're really suffering a shortage of teachers. Many of you have seen it probably in your own districts. The General Assembly is well aware of this shortage. And we are looking at different ways of closing that gap. Some ideas that have been thrown about. Perhaps we should actually make it easier to get your certification as a teacher. Maybe condense it to 4 years rather than 5, because we want to reduce the cost to the student who's studying to be a teacher, and we want that student teacher to be certified as quickly as possible or credentialed and in the classroom. Maybe we need more scholarship dollars. Maybe we need loan forgiveness. So all of these things we are considering. If you will take a time to talk to your school board members and talk to your teachers and tell us what you think would be most effective, that would be very helpful. And I would strongly suggest that you do sit down and meet with your legislative delegation and go over your ideas, because we absolutely have to solve this. We have to have qualified teachers in our classrooms, and we don't want our classroom sizes to increase, which is what happens when you have a shortage of teachers. And none of us want that. So let me go on. I want to make sure I cover everything. One of the elements that came to our attention in terms of improving the entire learning environment for a school system is supporting community schools as a model. And these schools, for example, have perhaps a full-time school nurse. They might have a caseworker where a family could stop by the school and get some counseling and maybe referrals to different social service programs to help stabilize the family. So there's a stronger linkage between the families and the school and the community, and the children are better able to flourish because the instability they may have been suffering in their home is being addressed. And we do have interesting models that are addressing that. So I would encourage you to look into those. They call them community and school models. One thing we also realized is our students, as well as our teachers and families, we're going through some strenuous times, and there were many mental health issues that percolated up to the forefront. So this past session, I think it was in 2020, we put enough money in the budget so we could reduce the student counselor to student ratio down 1 to 325, and it was much higher than that prior to the additional money the state money that we actually put into this program. So we're making a concerted effort so you all can go out and hire more counselors for your schools. And we think that it would be well worth your effort. But I'm sure that you also have some ideas too on how to spend the money. Another big topic that always comes to the forefront, and I don't know how many of you talk to your school boards regularly, but I know the whole thing about standards of learning and the testing requirements that have gone along with the SOLs has been challenging. And I think we have an opportunity to really examine the standards of learning, because we're now figuring out that there are different ways, many different ways to teach. We can measure progress in ways that are more comprehensive and more indicative of a child's academic success than a point in time and the test score on one day. So we have moved towards measuring growth in academic performance. We have moved towards putting less emphasis on the standards of learning tests and coming up with a more analytic framework that the student can participate in. But we still have, I think, too many SOLs, and the SOLs are still given too much weight. So we have a lot more work to do in that area. I would encourage you, again, to talk to your lawmakers. We had a bill, Senator Pillion put it in. I don't know if any of you are from did you know Senator Pillion's your senator? Well, give him kudos. He worked very hard. He put in a bill that reduced the number of SOLs considerably. It did not pass out of the House. I had put in a bill. Sometimes we try to solve the same problem with different creative measures. I had put in a bill that would have allowed school systems to get a waiver from their SOLs if they came up with alternative assessment measures that the Department of Education could approve. And they would have both quantitative and qualitative measures, but they wouldn't include SOLs. And we had a rigorous discussion on my bill, and I was even willing to amend it to say, okay, only school systems that had overperformed on the SOLs could be eligible for this, new assessment model where they could come up with a creative assessment. My bill didn't pass either. So we have to continue to have a conversation on this. And the other topic we have to talk about is your ongoing funding through the Composite Index. I come from an area, I represent, as I mentioned, Arlington, Fairfax, and Loudoun, portions of those three jurisdictions, Northern Virginia jurisdictions. And a fair amount of money, it goes outside of NOVA to fund school systems in other parts of the state, which is great. We need to have great schools everywhere. But the Composite Index is far from perfect, and I don't know if we will ever have the political will to even tweak it, but I understand that it doesn't really address oftentimes the cost of living in an area, or more importantly, the poverty in an area, the number of children who may be English learners as a second language, or may be new immigrants. So we don't have ways of truly getting a picture of the school system itself. Frequently, children attending a school system or the composition of the school system is less wealthy than the jurisdiction overall. And that's not always, unusual, but we have to make adjustments. We do have the at-risk formula, which does provide additional funding to our Title I schools. I have researched the possibility of an educational equity fund, which would actually shift additional money to schools with children who are actually at the poverty level or above it to some degree. We'd have to come up with a ratio, but those school systems serving high percentages of children in poverty would get yet additional money. And we have found that if we can stabilize our schools, especially in neighborhoods that don't have a lot of resources, that are resource challenged, we are able to help the entire neighborhood and the entire community. So these are important investments, and they're investments that we have to make. Let me go on. I can stop here. I have a lot to say on early childhood education and workforce development, because I was supposed to be one of two speakers today, and my colleague had a family emergency and couldn't join me. So I prepared a lot of material, realizing I was going to be the only speaker. I'm happy to take questions right now on the K through 12 if you would like to get some questions in, or I could move on to early childhood education. Is there a preference, or?
Let's take questions if that's okay. Okay, Phyllis.
Hi, and I'm so proud that you represent parts of Loudon.
This is Supervisor Randall, and she chairs the Loudon Board of Supervisors.
On standards of learning, if you've done any studying, what we know is standards of learning test really is a snapshot at the moment. If a kid is sick, if a kid is sleepy, if a kid is hungry, they're not going to do as well. We also know that there's lots of different ways that kids learn. I think there's actually up to 9 different ways that children learn. So in standards of learning, will you talk just a little bit, you touched on a little bit more of how we will or could start assessing a child's real ability and what they've learned that year in school versus what they can do on a test on that day? Because I know that there have been, especially the elementary school, some rolling back of standardized tests for 3rd graders and things like that, because it was just not valid. But what have they put in place to try to assess what young people, what our kids are actually learning, if you know that? Thank you.
Thank you. There is a waiver process in place, which I think your school administrator should be aware of. And this waiver process will allow for some exemptions on the testing methods. It will allow for additional time and additional accommodations for special needs children. But more importantly, it will allow the school system to bring in other measures besides the standards of learning. So you can apply for this waiver. Oh, I know it's not perfect. The gentleman over here is telling me it's not perfect. I know that. We have a lot of information that tells us, again, a test on a point in time I think is a disservice in many ways to the student and to the school, because you don't want a school to be labeled as a failure. Do you remember the No Child Left Behind, where schools were actually labeled when they, didn't meet a certain arbitrary threshold? That was very damaging. There were families and children in that school who were working very hard, who were doing their best, teachers doing their utmost, and many of those students made significant progress, but because they didn't meet a certain threshold, they were labeled as a failing. We're moving away from that. We have to move away from that. And we have to go now with the knowledge we have about the development of the brain, and we have to give our kids every opportunity. Yes, sir.
Senator from Buckingham County. I remember 5 years ago, you and I had the same conversation about the SML.
Yeah.
I'm so glad they changed. I think that piggyback from your question, I teach 5th grade, and there are now 3 ways that my children pass SML tests. There's a test given at the beginning of the year,
Right.
the middle of the year, and the end of the year. it's a growth model test. So if they make the growth, they pass. If they score higher than they did in the previous year, with enough points, it's considered a pass. Or if they just out and out make a 400 or better, then it's a pass. So I really applaud you guys are finally getting together to change the old one and done. You know, as a child can have a bad day and come to school and just hear the air going in their head.
Yes, it took a lot of work to do that. So we feel it's much more of an accurate measure than at one point in time. And we really need to keep hearing that, because there's going to be a continued debate, and the pendulum might end up swinging again. I hope it doesn't, but we have to bring experiential knowledge to the table, and we have to bring that holistic approach for our children's success. So I really appreciate you standing up and saying that. Their education is one of these areas where it's really subject to whatever theory du jour happens to be out there. Do you remember when I was going through school, they didn't teach math, they taught modern math. So, we had 3 years of not learning any multiplication tables or division. And eventually we caught up, but whatever the new theory happened to be, we were, subjected to. So we need to keep front and center your point, and I thank you for raising it.
Who's held responsible for a child not succeeding? That's the teacher in the school. Who's never to blame? That's the parents. So we need to start holding the parents a little more accountable for education as well, because they have the vested interest in it, just like we do. And I don't know how it's done. That's going to be your job to try to get it done. Where there are some parents that I never see. And they don't come to open house. They don't come to parent teacher conferences, even request. So, it's something that needs to change.
We definitely have to engage our parents as much as possible, and we have elected school boards. And certainly school boards were engaged during this past election cycle, and they were engaged through the whole COVID debate, but not all parents. And we really do have to go out of our way. I know one of the PTAs I was involved with, we offered rides to the PTA meetings. We picked up parents, we offered food, and we also brought the parents home. We found that when we had something interesting to offer, we brought the parents who were traditionally not involved. We also offered childcare services, babysitting services. So, but it is absolutely critical. And parents can be our strongest advocates. They are our partners in this, and we have to work together. Sylvia. Sure.
I appreciate you talking about teacher pay and increase in our county. I'm also concerned about the staff that's in the school system. So we're talking about our teacher assistants, talking about our cafeteria people, our custodial staff, where, they're at a lower wage than our teachers are. So is that up to the school board to, when you talk about those wages, or would you all have something to do?
It's really up to the school board. And I understand that there are different cost of living and salary adjustments that need to be made in different parts of the state. But the school board ultimately, has to hire these folks and actually has to come up with a pay scale that would attract them. Some school boards have used the one-time money we have given out more than $1 billion in the Commonwealth. They have used the money for bonus pay, and they've had other enticement packages. They have to be cognizant that they're using one-time money, but it had been, federal money passed through the state, and they've been creative in how they've tried to attract the personnel they need to run a school system. So, yeah, it's very challenging. But I do hear you, and I do think the state needs to put more money per pupil into the mix. That's your bottom line. Yes,
Yes, Senator Favola. My name is B. Lepisto Kirtley, Supervisor from Albemarle County, and a 34-year retired educator and principal and director. And what I'm asking is, you had mentioned regarding not having a fifth year, maybe condensing it into 4 years for the teachers to
Potential.
get their certification. Would it be possible for the state to use the ARP funds to be able to pay for that fifth year so that they do continue and get further training and such, but to be able to pay for that fifth year? And if that's a one-time spending of monies, so it's not ongoing. And in Albemarle, we are using the bonuses, and our school district is, we're using the bonuses for teachers also.
to help teachers get their credentials,
Oh, just as a bonus pay.
just as bonus
But
pay.
to get their credential, it would be great if the state would offer to pay for that fifth year. We have a shortage, and I understand, I believe it's the state that is also lowering the standards for substitute teachers. You only have to have a high school diploma or a GED. That is something that I think is a really big, in my opinion,
I don't think that's such a wise idea, by the way, with the state.
I don't think that's a very good idea either. And I'm hoping that changes, but if you want to get quality teachers, you have to give them the higher pay, because otherwise they will just go from one county to the county next door that is paying more. We're having the same problem with our police department, but we need to put our money where our mouth is, frankly.
That's a great point. And
Thank you.
for a period of time, and you were very careful to say it would be one-time money, so you would expect it to just be for a 2-year period where we could offer to put money, state money, federal money, distributed by the state on the table to pay for the credentialing or the fifth year, and you would use it as an incentive. And I think that's a good, yes, we could certainly do that, and school systems can do that as long as you make it clear that it's for this period of time. But it's a great idea. We need to, we need to acknowledge the importance and the status and stature of being a teacher and value it as a community and with a monetary reimbursement. So yes, that would be an appropriate use of money, and I'll go back and look and see if we can allocate more money to give you the flexibility to do that. But it's a good idea. There are other questions, and we can get into early childhood education if you have. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna say a bad thing here. So don't shoot. But why not color the money for the teacher's pay?
Why not what?
Color the money.
Color?
So that I know there's different cost of living in the different areas, but why not take the politics and other familiarities out of it and an area has, because I'm from Dickinson County. We realigned the pay scale with the school. We sat down in a partnership because we found out that teachers that had 10 years experience were still getting paid as the person walking in the door for the first time. They weren't given any step increases, so they were down at $35,000. That was the starting pay for the teaching. And we made sure we set steps in there that they got elevated as they had more time. But if our concern is recruitment, why isn't there something set? So there's none of this, well, that's my brother-in-law. God, we're gonna promote that one up right away. Because there's some of that kind of crap that goes on where I live.
So school board does establish policies for hiring and promotion. So that's all within the school board's realm. I know nepotism is not.
You know,
Oh, that's unfortunate.
and it's things like that I've seen.
We have had bills in the General Assembly that have, actually required there be a panel to review any hirings that were related to a relative. We have had bills attended to address
I
that.
like the gentleman, your comment. I said this in an earlier committee dealing with schools. One of the problems is we need leadership that will protect the teachers from the parents through the school board in some cases.
Yes, in some cases that is true. We have relationships with some of our academic institutions, William and Mary, and I think UVA, and a couple of other institutions that the state is funding leadership training for principals and assistant principals with the intent that communication and community building is part of that training. So yes, we're well aware we've got challenging situations.
Compliment you on the SOL stuff, because I think everyone knows that was I seen it in the military when we got to where we were driven to have these certifications, and they weren't certifications.
Yeah,
They were just handing the questions to the, I'm not saying this happened in SOL, but we were handing the question bank to the kids and telling them to memorize as many right answers. So we weren't really accomplishing it.
Well, we're continuing to learn and hopefully grow at the state level.
Jason has a
Jason.
question, then we're gonna move on to that.
Okay,
Jason, Lancaster County. I would, more of a comment, I guess. I would encourage the General Assembly to, on school modernization, to give localities as much flexibility and ideas of ways to fund public education, such as the special use sales tax. I think if we give the flexibility to our wide variety of different counties, we will come up with creative ways to make this happen. The General Assembly just needs to get out of our way and give us the tools, kind of much like it did with equal taxation.
that's an interesting point, and I appreciate that. Apparently, Halifax Authority has given. It can also use the sales tax. It's a 1 penny that they dedicate to school funding, and 9 other localities have that authority. And I think they implemented it through a referendum. So I don't know why it was limited to only 9 localities, but I will go find out. I think local governments should have that authority. Jim, do you know the answer, Jim Regenbaugh? Right, and that's what my notes say. So I think the position of VACO should be that we should grant enabling legislation to any locality who wishes to go forward with a referendum for a 1 cent increase in the sales tax. Yes, yes. I'll carry that bill. Well, I'll have a hard time getting it through ordinance. If we're doing taxing, my colleagues like referendums. Because I know why you would like an ordinance or why you would like a vote by the Board of Supervisors. I get that. I was in your position. But I think when it comes to raising taxes, just the reality is I have to use the phrase referendum. Yes, I am totally in favor of that model and just putting it on the books so localities don't have to come back specifically. Meg, do you want me to?
I think that we're at a perfect time for you to continue with.
Okay, and I will be very quick. We're supposed to end by 4. But if you are interested in early childhood education, a lot of good things are going on here too. We've got, again, about another $1 billion that has flowed through to jurisdictions and to nonprofit organizations. It's either CARES money or it's your Rescue Act money. And what we did is we supplemented the child care subsidy program. So we expanded the number of families who are eligible. And we really brought it beyond the, let me see, it went up to 350% of median income. We put, let's see, we put money into nonprofit groups so they could expand capacity. We allowed the money to be used to increase salaries for the providers and the childcare centers. And let's see what else. Oh, let me make a correction. I didn't mean to say the 350%, the new income eligibility. And this is in place now for 2 years, will allow families with a household income of up to 85% of the state median income, which is a more generous bracket than what I'd said earlier. So 85% of the state median income. So what we were trying to do, in short, was to provide a safety net, to get families back at work. We knew some families could not continue to telework. We knew we needed to create a market for childcare. And we needed that market to be affordable. And we also need the market to provide quality childcare. And one way we're approaching the quality element is through a workforce development plan, which many of you are aware of, and it's the G3, Governor Northam's program. You get a degree and you give back. So childcare is considered one of the high-need workforce tracks. So when you participate in this G3 program, you can attend a community college at no cost if you're going to get a degree, and it doesn't have to be a degree, it could be a certificate in a high-need workforce track. You'll be expected to draw down any grants you might be eligible for, a Pell Grant or others, but the state will be the last payer and you won't have a cost to attend the community college. And we also set aside up to $1,000 if needed, up to $1,000 a semester per pupil, if you have an emergency that would otherwise cause you to drop out of school. We have students who can't pay their rent, or students who have a car payment, or students who have a medical expense. And it is well worth our while to provide that emergency Band-Aid, enable them to pay that bill, to stay in school and get that degree. We've already invested in them. And in opening this up, calling the child care providers a high workforce need track was absolutely the right thing to do, and we are getting applicants. So we're hoping that we can really create a framework where home care providers are qualified. They have the basic safety training. We're hoping that our child care centers will all have somebody with some type of certification or degree if they're running a child care center. We're doing our best to ensure that every child care provider is going to follow CDC guidelines where it comes to the health and safety of that child. But most importantly, we want this care to be available to our families, and we want it to be affordable. So we're going to be doing a lot of work in this child care space. We're going to try to change the VPI match. In my high-cost jurisdictions, 3 of them, one of my jurisdictions periodically leaves money on the table, does not draw down the VPI grant because they have to put a local match on the table. That's not the real reason. They get about $7,000 per pupil from the state, and they have to put, about $7,000 into the kitty as well per pupil. And it doesn't cover the average cost of care up in Northern Virginia. It's about $21,000. So my jurisdictions are asking, and I think you would agree too, that we take the VPI money and try to put it into a pool where jurisdictions can maybe draw down dollars without, and we're willing to do a match, but without this per pupil formula, so we can perhaps make the money really work for us in jurisdictions that have, different cost models. There is a waiver program in place now, we just got it in place where you can draw down VPI money and it's not related to the per pupil formula. So for jurisdictions that I just talked about, you may want to consider pursuing that. Okay, I'll take questions on early childhood education and actually the workforce development too, if there's more that you would like to talk about or ideas that you have for the General Assembly.
So I'll
Nick,
ask this
go-
question. The G3 program that's out there, and I know it's kind of, is it kind of like Go Virginia that they established the program and it took a while for the wheels to kind of get lubricated?
I think it was more like the G3 program. It took a while for the wheels to get lubricated, but the governor signed it. I want to say, oh gosh, the fall of, let's see. Maybe it was the spring. Maybe it was like March. Available now, so it's available for this fall. But I'm not sure how much they've really marketed. Another program you should be aware of, and many of your school systems are using, and it's the dual degree program, which I really worked at getting funding for. So this enables high school students to take college level courses and to get a step up on that degree. So in some cases, a high school student can graduate with a diploma and an associate's degree at the same time. Now, isn't that wonderful? They could remove a barrier to getting that 4-year degree if they want to go on. Or if that 2-year degree is what they want for the moment and they want to enter the workforce, we have really made them workforce ready when they graduate from high school. We've also changed the G3 formula so we can, certificates are part of that program now. When it first started off, it was really the community college angle. The state money goes to train high school teachers so they are eligible to deliver the classes, a college level class. So many schools are participating in that, and I would really encourage you, if you're not participating in that program, it's the dual degree program, please look into it. I think it would be an incredible asset for your jurisdiction. Yes, sir. Buckingham, I know, does it, is, go ahead.
We recently shut ours down.
Oh, okay.
We didn't have the participation and the class sizes did not match other classes. One class would have a lot of kids in it. This
Uh-huh.
dual degree program.
I see.
It's cost effective to have one teacher with 5 students. The fact that teacher pay, has the General Assembly looked at maybe possibly rolling teachers into one healthcare system?
That's,
Right now, it comes out of it. I have to pay into state retirement. I'm mandated by what I teach.
yes, yep.
State employee.
So that, so you're, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So could the state look at possibly allowing teachers to join the state insurance? Or even forgive so much of the teacher's pay, you know, make it non-taxable? That would be just as good as a pay raise.
That's an interesting question, and I really don't know the answer to that. We haven't had any proposals from the executive branch on that topic. I don't know what the impact would be on your locality. I don't know if it would increase costs on the locality if they're reducing the number of people that are in the local insurance plan. So it may end up having a detrimental effect on your local government's ability to provide insurance to local employees. It is a very interesting question, and I will go back and look at that. I just, I don't have any insight for you on that. Yes, sir.
I think that would depend on some places, the county, the school are the same level.
Uh-huh.
I guess in related to that, because I think this may be part of it. Just looking at how the state does SOP model, and I know Favola and his SOP last. If I read it right, that'll be $5,000 roughly medical insurance, but yet it costs a lot more. I guess I would ask, what was the intention? You never did that number. Most people expect that.
I will take this insurance question back. I can say there will not be an easy answer. I expect I would have to probably ask for a study on that. And
I guess I don't remember seeing it allocated
I guess I would turn to the VACO staff, and if you can come up with a recommendation on how we would structure a study on this insurance question, that might be helpful. We can look into it again. I have just learned with insurance, it's a multifaceted thing, and every time you sort of poke at something, another issue comes up. Yeah. Yeah. There are always issues, but I'm happy if you can shape the study. I'm happy to look at it again and maybe have JLARC or one of our study agencies take a crack at it. Did you have a question, sir?
This comment is more about SOL reform. I would encourage the General Assembly to continue looking at the growth methods, measuring it, and using that instead of the SOLs, and doing away with more of the SOLs concept completely, rather than just cherry picking away certain tests like they did in elementary school, because practically what that means on the ground is, say, science classes got less funding and less attention in elementary schools as a result of things of that kind of cherry picking. So I would encourage the General Assembly to look at this more globally and to address that issue globally instead of just trying to say we need to eliminate this test or that test. We need to eliminate all SOL type of testing that we have and replace it with a measure.
With a more comprehensive assessment, and I could not agree more. You have a lot of friends, but I need to gain more. They need to be said in the House of Delegates, but yes, I totally agree with that. We have, what, about 10 more minutes? 20 minutes. Okay. Is there anything you want me to go over that I have not delved into that would be of interest to you? Yes, sir.
Chris Granger, I'm the chair of the Fauquier County Board. Thank you for being here and taking our questions.
Thank you.
One thing that's definitely come up, and my friends on the school board have brought up, is pay is important, and obviously some jurisdictions like ours have a greater ability to pay than others, and much like Fairfax and everywhere that you represent, it's the same. You can offer higher salaries. But some unspoken benefits are almost as valuable, and one of those has been talked about a lot is student loan repayment. And we've been talking about a local program, and that can only go, that's teachers that are in Fauquier County, and because the federal program, if anybody knows anything about the federal program, it's fundamentally broken. I think there's probably teachers that have been putting in for the program for 10 years and they haven't gotten any money yet. I know they're just taking a crack at trying to fix it, but it's still not fixed. So long story short, if the Commonwealth wants to look at something statewide, some type of student loan repayment, because almost every teacher coming out of college has student debt. So if there was a statewide program, if you really wanted to do something for starting out teachers, a certain number of years of service, certain dollars coming off their student loans, you put that together with the federal program, some localities that have those programs, might be a way to obtain and keep quality teachers.
I appreciate that.
Program. You want to address that, Jim? Right, about the student loan program that you mentioned that the state might do with the $25,000 cap.
We do. Yeah, we do have a framework, and it was actually student loan forgiveness. So it wasn't even repayment after a certain period of time, but we haven't really implemented it. And I'm going to take your suggestion back, Chris. I mean, I think it's probably the single most important thing, at least in terms of recruitment and maybe retention too, because teachers tend to leave the profession earlier than 5 years. I guess after a certain number of years, they're more apt to stay in, but this has been very, very challenging. And I also think we have to put more training dollars in for these, the virtual learning platforms have proven to be more of a challenge than school systems expected. And I would like teachers to have the best training opportunities available. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Good conversation today. I'm going to speak to you on capital funding for
Okay.
modernization schools.
Okay.
As we all await the December 1st report. And I think we've got some momentum moving that direction. I think today you indicated that you would support a statewide bill to allow localities the 1% option so that we don't have to come and say, Mother, may I, one by one, because that's a slow process. Senator Hanger today indicated that he would prefer a 1% sales tax statewide.
Yeah.
That would raise 1.4 billion, and that could be used for school construction. Delegate Watts says she doesn't prefer the sales tax by county option, even though that was something that has been done in 8 other counties so far, but that she would seek revenues from other sources, but start with using some of the year-end surplus that Mr. Regenbaugh suggested as his idea today is a possibility to put, say, 110 million, I think it was. Right. And so that
one time.
Yeah.
Which got cut off by the next session.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of talk going on. And lastly, by the way, I'm from Roanoke County, and what we would like to do is to build a new CTE school, because the one we've got is not large enough. We're turning away students because of not enough space, and because OSHA requires 20 people max per classroom for being the trades. So we want to build a school about twice the size, and at $275 square foot, that's going to come in at about $84 million. And that doesn't even include the piece of land, although that's something that we can work out if we sell one piece and buy another. At the end of the day, this is not an education program so much as it is an economic driver, an economic development driver because of the workforce needs in our area, as well as all across the state. So I would just lay this in front of you to think about with your colleagues in the Senate. Look at certain parts of education, like CTE, as an economic driver, and maybe we can get some grants to help offset the cost. While we'll take all the money you can give us, we would like some help on CTE because of the economic development impact of workforce. And that way, a lot of our students that go to college and then realize they should have probably learned a trade can just go from high school or maybe community college or go straight into the workforce, making good money. So think outside the box. There's a couple of issues here at play. How are we going to fund capital improvement, but also how are we going to address workforce with CTE? So think about that. We'd appreciate
I will.
ideas.
Yes, that's a really interesting point. And we do want opportunities for all of our students, not just the college bound. And we certainly do have needs in many of our trades. So let me see what we can do. I will take your ideas back. As a lawmaker, I always have to balance, as my colleagues do too, what would be good for one particular region or locality against what would be in the best interest of the entire state. We don't want to leave any jurisdictions behind. We want to give every jurisdiction the opportunity to really build the best school system and to do it in a way that they can afford and that the state can be a meaningful partner. And that partnership varies a little bit. It needs to vary by jurisdiction, and figuring out where that sweet spot is always a challenge.
And just
Yes, sir.
some more fodder. I spoke to Senator Tommy Norman today about this, and he indicated, in fact, he made a note on the ladder about the economic driver of the CTE school and the improved education, so we don't have to turn students away. And I understand you folks may be in Roanoke next week.
We're going to be in Roanoke. The Senate Finance Committee will be meeting next week for 3 days.
Anyway,
So I've got a lot of ideas.
yeah, and I think he's on our committee. So
Yes.
may come up again. Any help you can give us in a positive direction with funding would be appreciated.
Well, I will do my very, very best. And I do think we're going to have various sources of revenue coming in. My colleagues haven't mentioned this, but, you know, if the cannabis law is actually fully implemented and licenses for the production and distribution of cannabis do take place within the next year or two, over a 3-year period, we're going to gain, I don't know, 300 million is one estimate. Now, in tax revenue, now we've got that spoken for in statute. You know, we've got some going for substance abuse use, we've got some going for reinvestment, et cetera, et cetera. But that's going to free up dollars in the budget. And funding education should be at the top of the list. And this is your moment for school modernization. This is the time. If we can't get school modernization money in the budget now, either through grants or loans, I fear we're not going to have this opportunity for another 10 years, maybe longer. And I know that we have the literary fund. Jurisdictions are not tapping the literary fund to build their schools. And I have to figure out why. So I'm going to talk to some superintendents, I guess, but they're not really tapping that money. So I think it may have to be a combination of grants and loans, but we will have dollars, ongoing dollars. We've got the casinos that are going to be, some will be approved. We're going to get some state money. We will have additional sources of revenue that we haven't had before, and we need to place school modernization as a priority. And I will leave you with one last thought. I think we have to get creative in the partnerships we decide to create. And I know there's a group out there, in addition to the business community, which actually sees the value in school modernization, the environmental groups are incredibly motivated to help schools build better and build environmental buildings. They feel reducing greenhouse gas emissions is absolutely the right thing to do, as we do, but also turning the school building into a safe learning environment, having solar panels, having a courtyard where kids can go out and maybe do a rain garden or whatever. So the environmental community is so intent on lobbying for school modernization money, if it can be tied to good environmental design or a reduction in carbon emissions or moving towards renewable energy, they will be right with you. And they are in Richmond every day, 3 times a day. 10 or 20 of them. So I think we need to start developing partnerships with folks who really do have similar goals and will work really hard for you and for our kids. So I will just leave you with that thought. My commitment, like I said, is to work with my colleagues to carve out time. We've set up a trust fund for school modernization. There's no money in it. We have got to do something on that, and I feel very strongly about that. And I do think that teacher pay has to be addressed. I will take back the idea on the school loan repayment. I'd like it to be school loan forgiveness over a period of time. You brought some other great ideas forward. We will continue to try to give you flexibility as we continue to disperse the federal money. And we have up until, I think, December 2024 to get all of that rescue plan money out the door. But anyways, it's been a pleasure working with you, and I look forward to being your partner. Thank you so much for joining me and joining this effort. So thank you.
Thank you.